Hello, my name is Ian Gilliland, and this is the video of my opposition speech for the District World Schools application. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, we have term limits. It's called an election. People want to vote me out, I'm out. It's true for anybody. U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders. The senator highlights how voters are able to control who their elected officials are. This eliminates the need for term limits across all elected positions all over the globe. This is why we proudly oppose today's motion. This House believes that all elected government positions should have term limits. In this speech, I will first provide definitions, framing, and other substantive arguments, then refute my opponent's arguments. Firstly, we define elected government positions as all public offices filled through democratic elections, and term limits mean a restriction on the number of terms, consecutive or total, that an individual can serve in power. I have 2 points of framing. They are, firstly, authoritarian officials have existed regardless of enacted term limits in their respective countries, and secondly, the absolutist wording of this House's motion would mean that all elected officials need to be term limited despite their actual necessity to be term limited. First, substantive. Term limits hurt the quality of leaders. The issue with creating term limits is that it creates a system of government that fundamentally decentralizes quality leaders. By instituting term limits, all elected positions must be held by different people eventually, which keeps good leaders out of office and leads to inexperienced government officials. This happens in 2 ways. Firstly, we want our elected officials to have expertise in government, but instituting term limits actually leads to leaders that lack experience. Firstly, shorter time for learning. Without the opportunity to remain in office for a longer period, leaders won't have enough time to fully learn and understand the complexities of their role. While in office, leaders often gain valuable experience in decision-making, managing crises, understanding the needs of their constituents, and building relationships with other leaders. With term limits, incoming leaders might not have enough time to accumulate this expertise. Secondly, frequent transitions. When new leaders are constantly coming into office due to term limits, it can create a lack of continuity in leadership. Each new leader may face a steep learning curve, and the government or organization might experience instability, especially if there isn't enough time to build the necessary expertise or trust with their own teams. And lastly, less institutional knowledge. Leaders who have been in office for longer periods of time develop deep institutional knowledge, understanding the history, processes, and relationships that shape decisions. With term limits, there is a constant turnover of individuals, which can erode this knowledge base and make the government less effective. The impacts are that, well, firstly, leaders lack the time needed to fully understand the complexities of their role, resulting in less effective decision-making and crisis management. Secondly, constant turnover disrupts continuity, leading to instability and inefficiency as incoming leaders face steep learning curves. Thirdly, inexperienced leaders accumulate valuable insights into processes, relationships, and historical context. Term limits erode this knowledge, reducing overall effectiveness. And lastly, constant transitions hinder leaders from building deep trust within their own teams and other leaders, impeding long-term strategic planning and governance. Secondly, term limits keep effective leaders out of office. By instituting term limits, effective leaders are pushed out of government. Firstly, this prevents experienced leaders from staying. Term limits force even effective, experienced leaders to step down regardless of their effective or success or qualifications. This can prevent them from continuing their work and contributing their expertise to solving long-term challenges. For example, Nelson Mandela, who was widely regarded as an effective and beloved leader, was forced to step down after serving only 1 term as president due to South Africa's constitution, which enforces term limits. The impact of this is that term limits can push effective leaders out of office, even when their leadership is successful and their experience is valuable. By forcing experienced leaders to step down, term limits prevent them from continuing to contribute long-term solutions and governance. Substantive 2. Term limits prevent stability issues. Another issue with creating term limits is that they create governments that suffer from severe stability issues. Term limits hurt a nation's stability. Firstly, frequent leadership changes. With leaders constantly rotating in and out of office due to term limits, there's less continuity in decision-making. Frequent transitions can disrupt the flow of governance, making it harder to implement long-term strategies or maintain consistency in policies. Disruption of relationships. Strong relationships between leaders and their teams, other political figures, and international partners take time to build. Term limits force leaders out before they can fully capitalize on these relationships, potentially weakening trust and collaboration both domestically and internationally. And lastly, increased uncertainty. The constant turnover can create unpredictability, making it difficult for citizens, businesses, and other stakeholders to rely on stable leadership. This uncertainty can hinder long-term investments and complicate the government's ability to respond effectively to crises. For example, in the early 21st century, Mexico's political system was marked by alternating presidents who could not build long-term strategies to carry out continuous reforms due to the short duration of their time in office. The impact of this is that term limits can hurt a nation's ability to, term limits can hurt a nation's stability by causing frequent leadership changes, which disrupt continuity in decision making and make it difficult to implement long-term strategies. Leaders are forced to step down before they can take fully developed relationships with their team, other political figures, or international partners, weakening trust and collaboration. This constant and consistent turnover leads to uncertainty, making it harder to rely on stable leadership. I will now move on to attack the propositions point. So firstly, the propositions, on their first argument, the proposition argues that the longer someone holds power, the harder it becomes to remove them, even when they stop serving the people's interests. Additionally, they argue that without term limits, democracy slides into what political scientists call soft authoritarianism, system which are technically democratic but heavily dominated by a few individuals. While the concern about power accumulation is valid, elections already provide the necessary check on power. Once again, let's look back at Senator Bernie Sanders' quote that elections provide proper checks on power. Voters can remove ineffective leaders regardless of their advantages. Term limits often prevent experienced and effective leaders from continuing their work. Moreover, soft authoritarianism is not caused by term lengths, but by weak democratic institutions. Instead of term limits, we could focus on strengthening other areas of campaign and government, such as transparency and campaign finance. Term limits do not solve these issues, they only disrupt continuity and effective leadership. The proposition also argues that when the same individuals stay in power for decades, policies often stagnate. Term limits guarantee a regular influx of new leaders with new vision. However, while the term limits might bring in new leaders, they do not guarantee better policies or innovation. Experience and knowledge in government are essential for effective governance. Term limits force capable, experienced leaders out of office. Also, new leaders may bring in fresh ideas, but they also will face that steep learning curve I mentioned, leading to instability and inefficiency. Policies may not only be stagnant, but also suffer from constant reversals, of lack of long-term vision, as new leaders often are more focused on short-term changes rather than substantial progress. Thank you.